So on behalf of our community, both in historic Eatonville and across our amazing Black diaspora, I would like to welcome all of you to the first day of our season of Umoja for our Kwanzaa festival with Zora Neale Hurston herself. Now, before we get into today's program, I'd like to allow our speakers and friends who are participating in today's talk to introduce themselves, let you know a little bit about what they're manifesting in their community spaces, and then also have a message from the executive director of the Association to Preserve the Eatonville Community, who has been generous enough to allow us to share this space, not only with the Hurston Museum in historic Eatonville, but also to talk about the importance of preserving our Black spaces and how they will manifest into the future as we go into the new year. So to my guest speakers, if any of you would like to start us off introducing yourselves.
I'll go first, but I would defer to our honorable queens if they would so feel inspired. All right, well, my name is Darrell Stover, poet, cultural historian, science communicator. I am here in the Research Triangle Park region of North Carolina. I'm on the faculty at North Carolina State University. I had a program at the North Carolina Museum of Natural Sciences. I am a cultural activist and change agent, especially within the context of our diasporic culture and history, and more specifically via Afrofuturism.
I should have went first. I can't beat that. My name is Evan Campbell. I am an equity instructional designer at Sinclair Community College here in Dayton, Ohio. So I focus largely on helping instructors design their courses to be as accessible and as culturally aware for all students that are going to come to the school, regardless of their background or their level of ability. I also, I was in a car crash when I was 15 years old. So I been in a wheelchair ever since. I've also gotten to see life from a little bit of a different perspective as well. So.
And my name is Sydney Rose McCall. I am a historian and PhD student at the College of William and Mary up in Virginia. And I'm just so excited to be able to share this space with you all today. Before we get into our program, I would like to share space with the executive director of PEC, the Association to Preserve the Eatonville Community, so she can tell you a little bit, not just about the museum that is allowing us to hold this space and represent this Kwanzaa season, but also about what it is that Kwanzaa means in relation to everyday activism and resilience in our community. And Wina Theory?
Thank you very much. I want to express appreciation, sincere appreciation to Sydney McCall for curating this series. We are an organization founded in 1987. We have wonderful collaborative relationships as represented here by Professor Darrell Stover and Mr. Evan Campbell. But we are an organization that relies so much on the ability to present programs because of volunteers like Sydney Rose McCall. And I say this without any sense of exaggeration. If it were not for her dedication to having curated this program, the organization would not have been able to do this, in large part because we are in the final stages of the kickoff for the 34th annual Zora Festival. We will begin on the 7th of January. I do want to only take an opportunity to ask that as we think about unity, as we think about all of these community values, that if you are in a position to donate time or treasure, it will be very important that you do so, because the Association to Preserve the Eatonville Community relies upon, in part, individual donor contributions. So I'm going to ask you to visit preserveeatonville.org and see who we are, and to become a monthly member of the organization at whatever level. We're not talking about huge amounts of money, but if you do Wawa, or if you do Starbucks, or if you do anything on a daily basis, please think about signing up with us, because as my mother's mother would say, talk is cheap. It takes money to buy land. Thank you.
I think that's a perfect way to set us off for this season of Umoja. Those of you that are familiar with Kwanzaa might be familiar with the 7 principles and how they manifest throughout the year. But for those of you that are brand new, or this is your first time celebrating Kwanzaa, we're going to give you a little bit of a breakdown about what it is that Kwanzaa is manifesting and how is it that it relates to our Black diaspora. So today marks the first day of Kwanzaa, Umoja, which translates to unity. It is the first and foundational principle of Nugo Saba, which are our 7 principles of Kwanzaa. And without unity, the other principles could not stand. You heard Nwanethiri say earlier the importance of manifesting in our community spaces. That is what we are here to do today, is to not only talk about what unity means for each one of our speakers, but also to talk about how we can incorporate Umoja, the season of Umoja, into our whole entire year. Because as we know, Kwanzaa isn't just something for a season. It is something that we manifest each and every day, whether we know it or not. So as we light today's first candle, I wanted to allow our guest speakers an opportunity to share what Umoja, what unity means to each of them. Evan or Darrell, if you'd like to share some of your insights as I light my Kanara behind me.
Evan, I'll go after you if you are going to share.
Okay, yeah. Unity to me really is just trying to work towards a shared goal. And I think that today it's really interesting because we have so many forms of communication and so many avenues of information, yet it's harder to come together and unite now than it's ever been. You know, it 60 years ago, before the internet, before social media, before everybody had a cell phone, um, we had this whole civil rights movement where people were able to come together, and something like the bus boycott down in Montgomery lasted 13 months. I struggle to think, people coming together to do something for 13 months today in order to make that change. So it is a very interesting thought. And I think, it's also very pertinent for it to be the first day of Kwanzaa because, we need unity before we can get to so many other things, before we can work on all the things that are going on in the world. And there's so much. We have to come together first because we can't fight the world if we're fighting ourselves. So
True that. For me, Umoja is the fact that, here we are in different spaces on the planet, and we are engaging this principle, we're engaging this cultural celebration with that social media. So it's a two-way streak in some regards. A lot of times it's a big distraction, but it is also a tool. And I think how we manifest this tool for our purposes, for our advancement, in this particular case, for the advancement of the community of Eatonville and the legacy of Zora Neale Hurston, is significant. There is the fact that my daughter is in Savannah, Georgia, and she'll be doing a program at 6 o'clock this evening there, actually at her house. After this program is done, I'll be going to Durham. We're at the Hayti Heritage Center. They will be in full throttle with a Kwanzaa program going on. Here in my household, we'll have a gathering on the 30th. So the fact that there are a wide variety, and I'm quite sure out of the Washington, D.C. area where I'm originally from, there are a wide variety of Kwanzaa programs happening. And it's that unity of spirit and commitment to that principle and to the cultural celebration of Kwanzaa that is a major representation of unity. Unity in practice and belief and understanding and valuation of who we are as a people that I am very conscious of at this very moment as we engage this program today.
And I'm sure I speak for a number of folks when I say that the word Umoja sometimes feels a little clumsy in our mouths, especially as we close the year on a year that both locally, nationally, internationally was anything but unified. So when we talk about that first principle of unity and how in the midst of all of these uncertainties and anxieties that are rippling across the world, how is it that we still try to manifest this idea of unity when everything seems so fractured and divided? And I'm curious if any of you have perspectives on how is it that we manifest Umoja in our community spaces beyond just this season that we are coming together in fellowship to celebrate? How is it that we continue to push for Umoja in a world that feels anything but?
Mm-hmm.
Honestly, I think that we have to capitalize off of the cultural moments that we have. There's so many things. Everybody has a dozen different things they're worried about on any given day. I haven't seen a time, like after the George Floyd protests where people were moving in unity, and people were really all on the same movement. I haven't seen a time like that in a very long time. So I think it is capitalizing off of those moments. Hopefully they're less tragic in the future, but capitalizing off of those moments to really build something lasting. I think that's sometimes what we're missing. We get caught up in the swirl of it all. It was fun for some people to, change their square black or to get out and march for a summer. But, what was the commitment to a cause? What was the commitment to each other? So I think it's really taking those times, taking those rally points and using them to build towards a stronger community.
For me, that whole understanding that there are vast pockets of where unity and Umoja, the spirit thereof, is manifesting itself. When we start talking about in local settings, certainly here where I live in North Carolina, that happens in various ways. Certainly, as I referenced, the gathering that's taking place on today in celebration of Kwanzaa comes out of a sort of collective initiative situated in Durham that harkens all the way back through the progressive ness of the Black community in Durham that goes back over 100 years. That progressive practice is centered around certainly the economic, but it's also centered around, the church. So the building in which the cultural center is housed is a former AME church that was built in 1891. That is one of only a handful of buildings tied to the Black community that is still standing. There are a wide variety of events that take place there where different groups come together to make things happen. There's a Third Friday event built around art, but it's also about community building and addressing the issues of urban planning and gentrification. And so when I look at where that's happening locally and the level of commitment and engagement, that is, for me, ground zero, having been a former program director there. Just a few weeks ago, Sundays ago, there was a tribute to George Clinton. Now, I'm a longtime Funketeer. And the fact remains that the person putting that together is the present program director. He's the first program director there since I left. Well, the other thing it turns out is his birthday is December 11th, which is my birthday, December 11th. So when we look at these things where people come together doing things in the spirit of believing in who we are as a people and believing in our culture, it's just vastly heartening to me to see what happens in that space and then see who comes into that space to continue to sustain things happening. I think it can be said within the same context as Sister Njeri had shared about Sydney and her relationship to the Eatonville Center, is that, people come into our presence for real reasons to make a difference. And that difference is about just that coming together, that unification is a reflection of the principle and its manifestation. And I'm sure there are just vast examples that all of us could start to genuflect on. I'm a griot, so once you get me going, sometimes it's hard to stop. But I think the examples that I've shared are a reflection on what you asked of us, Sydney.
I would like to offer as well a comment about being able to identify something that each of us may want to involve ourselves in locally, so that we really can make that difference on an ongoing basis. I remember the expression to act locally, think globally, which means that each of us has the ability to identify something where we can make a contribution. It may be with the elementary school, it may be reading, it can be anything that really you want to do, that you can do given your obligations. But on an ongoing basis, it really does, it makes a difference. And sometimes that difference is not manifested until down the way a bit. But I want to say, as a person who works within a grassroots context in a place that has of only 2,500 people, Eatonville is a small place, but its profile, its presence within the diaspora and within the world of literature, in the world of high creative, because of Zora Neale Hurston, we have a specialness for a lot of people. And so again, I want to simply say that on an individual basis, identify something that you can do, because each of us does have a gift. Some of us have multiple gifts. It's so important to engage. It's so important to engage on a regular basis.
Absolutely. And I think all of you touched on something in your own ways of this word community. Now, it might just be a coincidence that the word community has the word unity very cleverly hidden in there. But I think especially as we talk about our diaspora spaces, that word is something that we can look at, we can digest, and we can immerse ourselves in. That actually leads us to our next question. So as we talk about the systems that not only are reinforcing this fervor of Black resilience and liberation, but also systems that reinforce Black disenfranchisement, Black erasure. We often talk about people like Zora Neale Hurston, Ancestor Hurston, as I affectionately call her. But when we talk about the work that they did as far as in our community spaces, how they were able to not only navigate these systems that were created for them not to exist, but also how they were able to capture so much of our Black culture. I think I still am amazed at how diverse and deep the Black diaspora can be, because you can be in a room full of Black and Brown people and have a different conversation with every single person in that room. I think it was Mary Church Terrell, a contemporary of Zora Neale Hurston, who at one point had said that Black people are the only truly colored people, paraphrasing, of course. But the fact is that not only are our complexions multiple and magical, but also the way that we manifest our culture. So I'm curious from all of you, how do you see Black culture ranging from Afrofuturism, which is actually what the Hurston Museum is immersed in at the moment, whether that's superheroes, whether that's eco-spirituality, whether that's music, food, how is it that Black culture manifest as Umoja? Because I think oftentimes when we talk about activism, people will immediately associate that with political activism, which in and of itself is very important as we continue to push for our civil rights and try to protect and expand our civil rights. But also Black culture has played a huge part in our long civil rights movement. So I'm curious from each of you, how do you see Black culture in your spaces, and how do you see it manifesting in that tradition of Umoja and unity?
I'll let you go first this time, Dr. Stover.
Darrell's fine. I think, because, the center is immersed in Afrofuturism as we move from this time plane into the next. The fan, and upon my coming in, I heard that Stevie Wonder tune, Saturn, and all of that manifests on a continuum as well, which the continuum I think of is how we embrace that planet. And if you are aware of the fact that Sun Ra, was from Saturn, he makes that point. A musical artist, an activist, an creative intellectual in his own right, multiple albums via he and his orchestra. And here's Stevie Wonder raising the planet again, Saturn, through his musical intellectualism. And so when we look at what happens on various planes with a certain sustained focus, and we talk about Afrofuturism, the primary example for me within even the context of Afrofuturism is that there is a collective of us, a host of individuals who have advanced this notion of Afrofuturism as an aesthetic and as a movement, and even have embraced advancing the terminology. In one sense, Ronaldo Anderson, now at Temple University, a younger man than I, whose father was my undergraduate advisor when I was an undergraduate student at the University of Maryland, College Park. has embraced establishing this Black speculative arts movement as the manifestation of Afrofuturism moving forward, and pulled together so many creative intellectuals, especially designers, visual artists, writers of a literary nature and otherwise, as well as STEM professionals. And so when I look at that movement and think about it in the context of what they've done very recently and over the past few years, a major series of programs at Carnegie Hall, a major manifestation of programs via the Smithsonian Museum of Air and Space and the African American Museum of History and Culture. Those sorts of things are manifestations, but individual members within that group, a major unification, if you will, Umoja manifesting itself in the literary world, is an anthology recently published called Africa Risen. And its presence on the planet brings together writers via the diaspora, but certainly more importantly, the African continental diaspora. And so what I find in the example that Zora Neale Hurston has set for us, keeping in mind that she was an anthropologist, keeping in mind she was an essayist, keeping in mind that she indulged in creative writing and nonfictional writing. Her documentation of our culture and setting example for even documenting it via film, as we document our discussion today, sets a very clear example. And you could say that an earlier contemporary of hers, W.E.B. Du Bois, again, engaging a certain Pan-Africanist focus as it engaged all aspects of our cultural expression, but also engaged in the political. So I'm very much embracive of Umoja from the standpoint of what I see happening in these times with a host of individuals who have joined together in so many different ways to do greater and greater things in projecting our culture. Despite the other realities and craziness that we see, nothing is stopping them, or shall I say, nothing is stopping us now.
From my perspective, I am a hip hop head. I'm a pop culture guy. I love my movies. I love my music. So I'm always looking at, how are we coming through in the zeitgeist, and the thing that I enjoy seeing now more than, well, probably we've ever seen, is that we're taking control of our own image. For a long time, everything that we created, we really didn't own. And a lot of things were pillaged, used, misused from us. So, when we think about somebody like Chuck Berry and all the things that he's responsible for, if he was really getting paid for all the people who sampled him and took the music and all these things, the impact that it could have. And, now we have people like Kenya Barris with Blackish and Issa Rae with Insecure. We have more and more music artists starting their own labels and bringing their artists and different types of music into the fold. So I think seeing that is major, and also seeing that it has a monetary impact, because that's what moves a lot of people. So when you can see a movie like Black Panther bringing in $1 billion, it makes the entertainment industry go, oh, okay, well, we got to start moving differently if we want to continue to be profitable. We got to take these people seriously. And it's those moments that bring us together as well. I definitely think that Black Panther dropping was a cultural moment. When you have Black people coming to the theaters like in Star Wars, dressing up and for their favorite characters and turn into a whole cultural moment. And I think it also revealed that in some ways we're kind of starved for it. People were showing up Black Panther, dashiki. People think, some people, Wakanda's the capital of Africa. So we're starved and we're hungry for it. We love any time that there is a moment like that we can all come around, celebrate one another, our culture, where we come from. So, and, I love to see that. I love seeing that, hip hop is, in my opinion, the biggest cultural force on the planet in terms of language, in terms of fashion, in terms of music, um, and the opportunities it's being able to afford our people. We got, in the last 5-10 years, the amount of Black multimillionaires and billionaires is boomed, and that's only possible due to our cultural influence, and us, all getting behind our creators that we love and are passionate by. So I think seeing that and seeing the impact that we have from that perspective was showing how we're moving in unity.
I think you both touched on something so interesting, not just the impact on the global scale, but also in a very deep internal way as well. I think that's one of the magical things about Afrofuturism, is that it allows us to engage both with our past, which is often something that is very haunting and very painful for Black people to navigate, but also it allows us to look to the future. It's this speculative space that allows us to manifest in a multitude of ways. And I think, to your point, Evan, about how hip hop, especially Black music, be that hip hop, be that jazz, be that neo soul, be that anything and everything in between, rock and roll and all of that jazz. I think that there's so much as far as how Black people have manifested culture as a form, not just of survival, but also as a form of expressing ourselves, is maintaining that connection to our past and to our future that is so, so powerful to witness. And I think that's something I'd be very curious to hear what you all think as far as what the role Black culture plays in continuing to challenge these systems that were not created for us to exist, but also how is it that people, not just in the United States, but Black and Brown people all over the world can continue to manifest Umoja. Because I remember we saw pictures of folks that were in South Africa and Nigeria and Germany who were all out here for Black Panther and are continuing to manifest, let's call it Wakanda vibes, in other parts of the world. And I know in Eatonville, we are also manifesting Afrofuturism in the tradition of Zora Neale Hurston, who is often called the mother of Afrofuturism. Because if she were alive today at, what would it be, 132 years old, I think she would call herself an Afrofuturist through and through. And actually, and why I'm curious what you think about as far as Zora's role as a Afrofuturist ancestor, but also in relation to what we are manifesting in Eatonville and what people are manifesting around the world for Black liberation.
I have to say to all of us assembled here that the power of Zora Neale Hurston's individual genius continues to amaze me because almost on a daily basis, if I'm in the museum and people who have journeyed there, they have come square feet. We are a small space, but the visitorship to the Hurston Museum is consistent. It is steady, and it's engaged. And as I interact with my colleagues in the scholarly community, they, to a man and woman, attest to the vision of Zora Neale Hurston. And in other words, it's really quite something to have people who have studied carefully her work see, and as Professor Stover talks about the Black speculative experience that W.E.B. Du Bois represents and that Zora Neale Hurston represents, because of the, how would you say, the care and the willingness to probe the future based on our past, based on what we have been able to do to not just survive, but to thrive. And so sometimes when we're having these kinds of conversations, they may seem otherworldly or not, they may seem like they are, how should I say, they are, in fact, they are grounded. They are grounded in a tradition that allows for us to look forward, to not be, to not feel the oppressiveness in a way that prevents us from thinking about our future. I know that this may sound rambling, but sometimes I have wondered, given the structure, given the system in the culture that we live here in the United States, where, as Evan Campbell used the example of Chuck Berry. In other words, we are not given, we're not acknowledged, but people continually pilfer. They continually steal. I mean, it's just a way, it is actually, it is a way of working. It's a way of working. Given the fact that what the data talks about, young men who are 14 to 25, what you expect to happen. But yet, the rap is in Finland, the rap is in South Korea, the rap is in Palestine, the rap is in Japan. In other words, the creative genius, the individual creative genius of our people continues to have a kind of global impact. And so you wonder, how is it in a system where you're not supposed to even survive, that you have this ability to impact the global culture? That to me is really quite amazing. And as I say, to the example of Zora Neale Hurston as an individual genius, the impact that she continues to have on such a vast variety of people, speaks to the power that our cultural roots represent. I just need to say that simply without being bombastic. To me, it's a fact, because of what you see, in the larger society, in the global society. And I will say this: people come. I want to recount, for example, this anecdote. There was an Italian professor, I should say a professor from Italy, all right, who was visiting with us, and he was talking about translating mules and men. Now, for any of you who are familiar with mules and men, this is Black dialect, as they say, for real. And so to have an Italian say that he was wanted to translate, and he said, well, you see what it is, all I have to do, he said, is to determine which dialect. He said, because in Italy, there are so many dialects. He said, but you just have to, her work was in dialect. All we would have to do is to determine which dialect, and then we would go forward. So I found that to be, I really had to smile, because it's one thing to say you're going to translate Their Eyes Are Watching God, which has a combination of, elegant standard English as well as dialect, but to say that you're going to take the Black folkism expressions and translate it. But that just, again, that's the power of the individual genius.
Mm-hmm. 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 Yes.
I'm just sitting here still soaking all of that in. And then Darrell, did either of you have anything to add to that?
Well, I think we have been complete in how we've addressed and responded to this notion of where does the unity manifest? How is it expressed? What impact does it have? And we show that our unity is global, even though we're acting locally. Hip hop started in the Bronx, but we have to keep in mind that it's connected to an oral tradition that goes all the way back to the continent, so we're in West Africa and the like. And dialect, to go back to the just more recent anecdote, is just as expressive of who we are as a people creatively, in light of what we've done to the English language, which originally wasn't our own. Many of us then also were exposed to other European languages other than English, French and the like. But what we've done with that is set the stage for how other cultures, because it'd be interesting to just sit and listen to, Korean rap, Japanese rap in their own tongue, where they are probably bringing some of their own dialectic into their, shall we say, lyric. And for us to hear just now that, a scholar out of Italy saw first and foremost, the value of Zora's work to other peoples, and also understood that its value was in how it captured the folk, how it was of us deep down. And so when I look at how our discussion has gone, each of us have embraced what is the internal as it manifests outwardly, but who we are internally are some very, shall we say, highly complex and highly rich manifestations of spirit and soul that has impact that people are able to feel and understand. Evan and how we've brought up George Floyd protests and the like, and how global that was. That global embrace of our culture, of our protest and politic, that global embrace of who we are is certainly what Zora was examining and documenting, for all time, and placing a value on it. I think we take a lot for granted as to who we are, what we've produced, and what we will produce. And I think it's that sort of coming together and understanding the significance of what we've produced and what we will produce in an Afrofuturist projection, is where there is, I guess you could say, the work to be done. And that work has quite a bit of potential for bringing about even greater success within our own institutions, with us linking and, yes, providing that talent and treasure which was just spoken of, that needs to be brought to bear within Eatonville as well as within our other local spaces and institutions that maintain our rich cultural heritage.
Yeah. And I would just add to that and say, I think the more we recognize our cultural power, the more that we can, claim our own identity. I think that, now we're really, for the first time in American history, starting to have the uncomfortable conversations and start to dig at, we're finally talking about what does reparations look like? How do you even zone in on the people who have been affected throughout history by these things? We're finally talking about redlining. We're finally talking about sundown towns and tragedies like Tulsa. For the first time, these are real conversations that are happening. And I think people are seeing not only the fruits of Black culture and all that we create and what we do, but they're also seeing what we've gone through all at one time, and everybody's trying to reconcile this. It's kind of that Watchmen phenomenon where you can see something so cultural, you can see a bit of history, a bit of futurism, the superheroes, the Black experience all collide, and it's this aha, whoa experience. It's a moment and where everybody's talking about it because it perfectly encapsulates everything that's going on now. At the same time, we're talking about somebody like Rihanna having create Fenty and become a billionaire. We're talking about Trump trying to have a rally in Tulsa 100 years after he gets burnt down. Like, how are these two things coexisting at the same time? But as I think as it's more talked about, as it's more of a conversation, as we have the ability to claim our identity more and more, we'll be able to bring ourselves together instead of fighting over a narrative that was fed to us. We come together around creating the narrative that we want.
And I think one of the things that I love so much about the season of Kwanzaa is the opportunity for people of different generations to come together to have these types of conversations. I know for a lot of first-time Kwanzaa participants, there's this anxiety around, oh, do I know all the information? Do I have the right materials? Do I have the right do I even have the ancestral knowledge to even be able to engage in these types of discussions? And I think each of us is in our own generation. Some of us might be in overlapping generations in this discussion, but the beautiful thing about it is that each of us is coming from a different space and place, and we're still able to dialogue. We're still able to talk about how is it that we're manifesting Umoja, the 7 principles all together into our everyday practices. Even people who aren't familiar with Kwanzaa are still manifesting these principles in their lives. And so as we come to a close for today's celebration, well, a close, but not a close, because we're still going to be celebrating even after we depart. But I'm curious from each of you, what is one thing as far as Umoja goes, and as far as Kwanzaa as a season and a every day, every year call to action? How do you see Umoja manifesting for not only the people listening in today, but people who will listen at different times of the year? What is it that unity can do for our everyday practices, for our everyday resistance, and also for manifesting that magic that is Afrofuturism, that is all that is the Black diaspora? I know that's a loaded question.
Evan, you want to go before me?
Whew, okay. I would say don't forget, or along with unity, it's really important to have commitment. And I think committing yourself to unity is committing yourself to the community in some shape, way, form, getting involved and finding that small way that you can act locally. That's the building steps. It takes each of us using our different strengths in whichever way is best to really lift up the whole. So finding a way to commit, become a part of something, add your value. I think that's one of the biggest things we can do in terms of creating unity.
Yeah, I would add to that, when we look at the Nguzo Saba, the 7 principles of which Umoja is the first in this celebration, is the sheer fact, as has been voiced earlier, embracing this culture and the cultural practice, as my daughter says with her initiative, 365. And what that means also is, always trying to find a way in and not a way out. Don't talk yourself out of embracing Kwanzaa and its principles. Don't talk yourself out of your Black identity and who you and we are, but find a way in. And that makes it all the more easier. Don't doubt, no self-doubt, no doubt instilled by others. Of course, there's going to always be the pushback and the dismissal and the challenge to who we are, our history, our culture, but no one is in the best position to justify our history and culture within our hearts and minds, but ourselves. And so anyone from outside of that sphere has no bearing, no business. I could go on, but I'm more interested in how we carry forth with unifying in the practice and belief in ourselves, and everything will be all right as a result.
I would say as parting words, emphasizing what Evan Campbell has said, and that is to find a way, in an individual way, to contribute. I would also reinforce what Professor Stover has said in terms of, really having a kind of certainty, having a kind of sureness that that there is a path forward for us, that we have, as in this country, as we have seen now globally, this sense of people wanting to have a better life, not succumbing to oppression, it's what makes us human. It's what makes us human. And in our experience here, as people of African ancestry in the United States, we have a wonderful tradition of going forward, of surviving and thriving. And to remember that when so many images and so much of what the culture, mainstream culture, wants to assign to us is a negative. You never were anything. Don't worry about being anything because it's not possible. That's a complete falsehood. And so if we can, as individuals, make certain that we have that assuredness so that we can help the younger people coming to know that, I think that those of us who are on this call, we have been given that assuredness from our parents, from our community. It's something that we can pass on to the younger people so that the traditions can be held. Now, of course, I'm obligated to say that there's one thing that each person on this call can do. It is to help others to hear about this message. That's one. And then if you can, then visit our website, and see what you can do by way of volunteering, by way of becoming a contributor to the organization, because we are what's called a Black-led organization, and the data shows that our organizations have more of a challenge, because frankly there is a difference in the way that banking institutions relate to our organizations as opposed to mainstream organizations. It's unfortunate, but it is a reality. However, the individual donor, we as individuals can supplant that disparity. We can do that if we will. So I will ask you to visit our website, www.preserveeatonville.org, and become a recurring member, a monthly member of the Association to Preserve the Eatonville Community. Monthly recurring is even more important than a large one-time contribution. Those are the realities of the world in which we live, because donors who are looking to see how we perform as an organization, what is the commitment, what is the expression of unity, that they look at that. And it's interesting to know that we have people in North Carolina, in California, in Texas, in Mississippi, who are members. It means that the Eatonville community actually does have a national presence. It has in the mind of the community. So with that, I want to again thank Sydney Rose McCall for her leadership here. She has worked with us for about 2 years in person. She's now gone on to pursue her doctoral studies, and she has kept the commitment while she is in Virginia. Eatonville is ever on her mind. Thank you, Sydney Rose McCall. Thank you, Professor Darrell Stover. Thank you, Evan Campbell.
And to echo NY's words as I get all choked up, thank you all so much for participating in our first Kwanzaa program this season. And again, there is no Umoja, there is no unity without community. So if you are able to donate to support not only historic Eatonville, but the work of our amazing guest speakers, you can find out more information about ways to support our collective work, not only on our website, but also by following us on social media. All of those resources will be made available to you all who are listening in either today or a little bit later. But thank you all so much for joining us in this space today. And we hope to see you as the season goes on, because the beautiful thing about Kwanzaa is it might be a 7-day celebration, but it is an all-year commitment to manifesting miracles and magic in our community. So I'd like to thank our guest speakers, and I hope to see all of you as we continue manifesting Umoja in historic Eatonville and across this great world, because we make culture, we make magic. And the beautiful thing about Eatonville is that you have an actual space to go and find that magic. So if you make your way down, to Central Florida at some time, maybe wait for it to warm up a little bit. But Eatonville is there for you, because historic Eatonville was not only the muse and memory of Zora Neale Hurston, it is living history. And as many of you know, so many of our Black spaces are under threat right now. So for us to actually have not only the first incorporated Black town in the United States to still be here all of these years later, but also spaces in North Carolina and California and Virginia, all across the world that are Black spaces. It's one thing to read about these places, yes? It's another thing to actually walk in these spaces, to see them with your own eyes. So make sure as you continue to manifest activism, liberation in your own communities, that you make it a point to find out these Black spaces that are in your space and also beyond, because there's so many of them that are under threat right now, historic Eatonville amongst them. So your work, your labor, your donations are what allow these communities to survive. So as you go on to manifest Umoja, keep in the back of your mind that these spaces are here for you as a space of healing, as a space of liberation, and as a space of Umoja. And again, thank you all so much for joining us today. And we hope to see you at our next program as we continue manifesting this season with Ancestor Zora Neale Hurston.